Alright, MS 460 Magnum, otherwise known as the 046. What I'm going to do here is my best to try to explain the difference with a 460 Magnum in the United States versus other places if you want to get a little bit of performance out of your saw without worrying about, am I modifying it? Well, in the United States, if you got a 460 Magnum, all it did is say Magnum. That's the only difference with the saw. And everyone may ask why. Well, I'm going to tell you. Well, the EPA regulated these saws. So in the United States, they came with a Magnum sticker and a .68 size main jet in the carburetor. The 460s and the 046s came with a .70 size main jet in Canada, Australia, outside the US. The Magnum model came with a .76 main jet. So, that is the difference in the fuel delivery. Now, why was that done? That was done because on the stock muffler in the United States, the only option available was a single port. And by single port, there's only one hole in the side. And there's a lot of videos on drilling them bigger and modifying your saws. And is that a good idea or not? That's up to you. But I know for sure that Stihl sold this saw with 3 different mufflers. This is the United States muffler. On the inside of this muffler, there is what's called a baffle. This large rectangular item inside the exhaust is a baffle. That's a spark arrestor screen. But the key points are the size of the small hole. And granted, there's a slit in front of it. But then the baffle. So, why is this important? Well, if you start modifying your exhaust, you're trying to get the exhaust gases out so the saw breathes a little bit better. And by doing so, you're going to change the air-fuel ratio. So, you need to give it more gas. So that's why with the restrictive exhaust in the United States, they gave you a .68 size jet so that you don't have to adjust your carburetor drastically, like 3 turns open on the jet, or on the high and low screw. So to show you the difference, here is outside the US, inside of the muffler. It looks like I'm going to need a light. There's no baffle. And notice the size of that hole. It's gigantic. I think it's about 17 millimeters in diameter. I mean, but it is a monster. Just that side hole is a monster compared to the US model, which is so tiny. In addition to that, the models outside the US came with dual port. So there's a port also on the front cover here. So that's another place for exhaust gas to get out. Now you want to get that gas out to keep the heat in your saw down. Now these don't have a spark arrestor. I'm not even going to get into that. Use a spark arrestor. I'm just going to say that. So that's what we've got. So if my plan or your plan is to increase the flow of the exhaust on your Stihl MS 460, Magnum or otherwise, you're not operating the saw beyond what Stihl's intention even was, because they sold it with this muffler on it just outside the United States. And because of the increased flow, they increased the jet size to .70 from 6.8, which is what the stock saw had. Now, the Magnums used the same muffler with dual ports, but they just increased the jet size to 7.6, so they got more gas. Now, that's the muffler. Now, here's the carb. And this is a really, really simple thing to do, guys. I watch a lot of Buck and Billy Ray, and I got to give him a shout out because his videos are hilarious and they're very instructional. But anyway, he likes to keep it simple and safe, and I like that. So there's 4 screws in the top of this carb, and you just unscrew those 4 screws. Then here's the diaphragm that comes out. And here's the jet, right here. This is the jet. I've got it partially unscrewed already, but all you do, if you can see that, I don't have a professional setup or GoPro or anything like that. I'm just using my cell phone. Just unscrew it, and the jet comes out. And here's your .68 size jet. Let's see if you can see that or not. .68. Well, see it or not, that's what it is. So my plan is to make my saw a Magnum with more than the sticker on it. So I've got new jets, and I want to go to the Magnum, so I want the 7.6. So what I have here are the part numbers, right? This is a Walbro carburetor, so it's got the Walbro part number, and this is from Walbro. And the part numbers are all the same except for the size of the jet, which is right here. This is a 7.4. Now you're correct, I did not mention 7.4 is a jet size. So why do I have one? Simply because the 7.6 is on back order and Walbro's waiting for them, and I wanted to play with my saw with the muffler upgrade. And I don't have to tweak the carburetor and mess with the screws and be well outside of the adjustment range of the carburetor when I did it. So I wanted to go to a 7.4. That's a big jump from a 6.8. But when I go to the 7.6, it shouldn't be more than leaning it up a little bit after it all is said and done. And we'll see. So the stock, I got a brand new HD16C Walbro carb on there right now, and that's what this one is. And, you know, from Stihl, brand new, untweaked, it's idling at about 3,700 RPMs, which is high. They recommend 2,500. And it was maxing out at about 13.2, 13.4 on the RPM meter. So I wanted to put it into some wood, you know, as the pros say, pro being people like Billy, who use saws and have respect for. So you put it in the wood, you see how the saw cuts. It cut amazing. I run a 33 RSF full skip steel chain, and I sharpen all my chains on my own, whatever. So it was a brand new, there's a 25 on here now, but I put the 32-inch bar on there, brand new ES light with a full skip chain, and it just ate up the wood. I mean, I was leaning on the handle, and it was screaming. Put it on the tack, it's running exactly where it's supposed to be. So now, how do I tie all this together? Well, here it is. If you're wondering if you could do an exhaust modification and you have a carbureted saw, you're going to have to give it more gas. And you could do that simply by twisting the high and low adjustment screws. Now these red limiter caps are on here. And then there's an oval piece in here. That is the limiter itself. It looks like this. I took this off of my existing carb. And you can see on the inside, all it does is it creates a stop for the screw. So when it turns, it stops when it hits a certain point. So it prevents you from twisting the screws of the carburetor and getting your carb so out of whack that you got to bring it into somebody to get it into whack. So you got to get that out. So how do you do that? You take a small machine screw and just screw it into the center of the red plastic, and it will gently lift it up, and it'll push this outer limiter out. I just didn't even bother putting it in, but I kept the red limiter caps on my other one. It's irrelevant whether you do that or not. So my thought is that and this is, by the way, I searched high and low for an actual Stihl brand original factory muffler. Good luck. Good luck is all I gotta say. So this is a brand called The Dukes, and I wasn't sure what the quality was going to be, the size of the holes, you know, what the flow was going to be, and if it was an even comparable muffler size and whatnot to the original Stihl muffler. And it's quite a bit lighter too, I gotta say. I am really impressed with the Dukes, and here's why. The muffler diameter hole, they didn't go crazy modifying and increasing the flow of your saw. They're using the stock Stihl recommended 17 millimeter diameter or so. And then the outer cover has the stock size dual port. So in theory, if you put a near to stock 0.74 size jet in your carburetor, you might not have to adjust it very much. You're not fiddling with the carb forever. And this is a quick fix, guys. It's just unscrew this main jet here, you know, and screw in the new one. And then just put the bottom of the carb back on it. I mean, it's at the top of the carb. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal at all. So I'm going to do that. And you'll probably notice I've got a West Coast saw bark box here. I'm hesitant about using it because of the sound. I don't want to have to wear dual air protection. But with the increased flow, technically speaking, I got a Magnum. I got the 7.4 jet, soon to be a 7.6. And it's totally stock with the Duke's muffler on there. According to Stihl, what they put out from the factory. So if I put the West Coast saw bark box cover on there with the ginormous dual port, maybe I will actually see increased horsepower from this saw, and I will maybe have to adjust the carburetor to give it a little bit more gas. So that's the plan. The Dukes does come with a gasket that will go against the piston. And just because I didn't want to have to deal with it, I bought a new gasket for a few bucks from Stihl to go in between the muffler halves. I am not going to even mess around with putting this on there because although it would make for an interesting video, I like using my saw. So I'm just going to use it. I will point out that West Coast saw does say tabs may need to have to be bent on the stock muffler if you're going to put the bark box on it. And those are the tabs they're talking about right there for the spark arrestor. I mean, you probably just Dremel them right off, like who cares? But you can see for sure that the bark box isn't going to mount flush with those there. However, if you have an outside of the United States saw, it's going to mount up perfectly flush. So the reason for me buying the Dukes and not modifying my existing exhaust was less work, man. I spent like 30 bucks on the muffler, whatever it was, 20 something bucks, and you don't have to do anything. You just bolt it on. There's no drilling, there's no dremeling, there's nothing. So I'm going to put all this together. I'm going to put the 0.74 jet in there. We're going to throw her on the tachometer and see what she does. When the 7.6 jet comes in, I'm going to put that in. So that's in general what the deal is between the 460 Magnum, the US models, and the non-US models. I do hope this helps somebody out. I will point this out at the very end. So there is a hole in the carburetor, and if you increase the jet size to a large size, is it going to make a difference? Well, on this model carburetor, the HD16, the hole in the Venturi is fairly large. If you can see those holes inside the carburetor. Probably not. But there's small holes in here that cause airflow and suction and whatnot to occur. And it causes the air to draw the fuel. There's plenty of videos about that. I'm finding in my research that this carburetor is designed to have the larger jet, so it shouldn't make a difference. You shouldn't have to try a whole new carburetor out. It should work just fine. There's somebody on like forestry.com or something that laid out a really good explanation on all this stuff with part numbers and everything. But based on what I can see, I didn't waste my money on a brand new HD16C Walbro carb because, you know, you can just buy the jet, which is the only difference, and then, you know, remove the limiter on your carb and adjust as needed. And we're going to see how she does.